Welcome to HQ Spotlight. I'm Tommy Tran. Thanks to Jacqueline D'Agostino. We'll get back to her in a second. College football is back. But we take a quick look back at week 0. There were 5 games, and boy, the under in Ireland, we were sweating that on the reverse touchdown. Dan Mullen era almost became a upset city. 30.5 is what Idaho State was catching there. Nearly won outright at 22-1. And the last second field goal by Hawaii getting it done at the death in a spread that was 2.5. Hey there, folks. I'm Tommy Tran with one half of the Cover 3. That's going to be Chip Patterson and Danny Cannell. It is Wednesday. It is college football season, so we are going to pick all of the teams involved in the top 25, and these guys are going to help deliver that to us here today on HQ Spotlight in one of our revamped studios. So, Chip, I want to give you a tip of the hat, by the way. We were sweating that under 51.5 and that touchdown. What were you thinking?
Well, listen, I knew that with all of the action that we had back and forth, we'd already benefited from some muffed punts. We'd benefited from some fumbles. And so to be able to get through with some luck of the Irish in Dublin, we'll take it. A win's a win. Certainly is. All right, so let's get right to it, guys. What a week 1 slate that we have. We have 3 top 10 matchups here. It hadn't happened since 2017, and we're going to talk about 2 of the games here on this segment here. First off, Texas catching 2.5 at Ohio State with a total at 47.5, and it's going to be a Saturday noon game. Now, interestingly enough, there's a chance where both of you guys cash your tickets here. So, Chip, I'm going to start with you in your first half play. What's the handicap here in this top 3 matchup? Yeah, Tommy, this is going to be about continuity and about a little bit more experience over total inexperience. It's been about a half decade that Steve Sarkisian's had most of his brain trust together in terms of offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams, the core of that Texas coaching staff, while Ryan Day has had to reboot his offensive coordinator and his defensive coordinator. And while we really have 2 new first-time starters, Arch Manning for the Longhorns and Julian Sayin for the Buckeyes, we've seen Arch. He has now made appearances in 2 different seasons. He has made career starts. Heck, he has been on campus in Austin for more than 30 months. I think Texas is a little bit further ahead in the development curve than Ohio State is. I would not have this pick if they were playing in November, but they are not. They are playing in September. I think Texas gets off to a little bit of a faster start. I'm going to go Longhorns in the first half, plus 1.5. Because you guys were at the Cotton Bowl watching these 2 teams go at it, and then it was 3-year starter Quinn Ewers and 5-year college guy Will Howard, and so you had experience. Chip mentioned, obviously, the turnaround, the fresh faces that we're going to see here. You're on the other side, though. Full game, Ohio State, no championship hangover for the Buckeyes.
I don't think so. We've talked so much, and even Chip there just talked about Arch Manning. He's gotten so much exposure. The hysteria is at an all-time high. I haven't seen anything like it in college football in my 15 years covering the sport and broadcasting. And I think there's almost 0 chance he reached the expectations, which are off the charts. I think he has a good year, but starting on the road, that's the biggest difference for me, because the line tells you that these matchups are pretty evenly tied. And we did a little big game breakdown in the Cover 3 pod, and we were going back and forth position by position. It was pretty split down the middle. An edge here for Ohio State, an edge here for Texas. But I think the one name that we're going to be talking about after this game is the best player the best football player in the country, and that's Jeremiah Smith. You can talk about all these young quarterbacks and what are they going to do. Even though Jeremiah Smith was held to 1 catch and just 3 yards in that playoff performance against Texas, I think he's too much. I think that game has lingered for him all offseason, even with the national championship. I think he wants to make a big splash in this one, but the home environment, putting Arch Manning in the shoe, not being able to operate cleanly and communicate with the crowd noise that's going to be there, I'm going with Ohio State. If you are nervous, I wouldn't hate it if you took the Ohio State money line, but for these purposes, I'm going to lay the 2.5 and say they win by at least a field goal, but I think this game's going to be awesome.
Yeah, you guys went 22 minutes on this game on the Cover 3 podcast. A nice deep dive in there. Again, I encourage you guys to go check that out. All right, this is not going to be a ranked-on-ranked matchup, but it is number 8, Alabama, taking on Florida State at Doak Campbell Stadium. And you guys are going to be there for the pregame show, Danny, so I'm going to give you first word because we're talking about nearly 2 touchdowns. You like your Noles to cover the number. Take me through it.
I do. I'm a little bit upset that we didn't lead with this game. And this is the biggest game of the weekend for me. It's the biggest game for the pregame show. Is going to be there on site. So there's a couple things that goes into this. One, maybe even most importantly, is keep an eye on the forecast. They're forecasting 80% chance of rain, which could really slow down both of these offenses who are both breaking in new quarterbacks. You got Ty Simpson named the starter for Alabama, and you got Tommy Castellanos coming over with a new system paired with Gus Malzahn. You're expecting them to try to have some fireworks in the plans to try to get Alabama maybe a little bit out of position, scheme up some big plays. But I think this is going to be a game more determined in the trenches, especially if it's ugly. I think Ty Simpson could struggle a little bit. I think both teams want to establish the run game, which could mean ugly kind of football, lower scoring. I don't hate the under either, but come on. Florida State at home. I think when it started, it was around a touchdown, and then it's just soared, even touched 14 points at some point. I'm going to take all those points at home, say that this game is one that Mike Norvell has to keep close to keep the fan base involved, to keep his team's confidence up moving through the season. So I'm going to take all those 13.5 points playing at home for the Seminoles.
Okay, you're going to be grabbing the points. And Chip, if I turn to you, it's interesting from a Bama perspective that they would be quote-unquote flying under any radar, but it seems like over the summer with SEC Media Days to win the conference, maybe be a bit of a dark horse to win the national championship. That's down the road. But for this game, away from Tuscaloosa, laying nearly 2 touchdowns, what's the play for you?
They say that you should bet the number and not the name. Well, excuse me while I bet both the number and the name, laying it with Alabama. 13.5, of course, a key number. I would stay away, if this thing does end up continuing to soar, and we're talking about 14.5. So I like being able to get under that key number of 2 touchdowns, but it is also an Alabama team that I'm just buying a lot of stock in. They're my pick to win the SEC championship. I think they're one of the best teams in the country along both the lines of scrimmage. I think that Alabama's defense will be getting back into that vintage Alabama defense. We're talking 2015, 2016, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne. Only this time, it's players like an LT Overton. It's that defensive line that I think is going to be outstanding. And so, as I look at how they're going to want to play this game, it doesn't matter whether it's sunny, it doesn't matter whether it's rainy. They want to mash and squeeze this Florida State team, which I do think is inferior in the trenches. They are missing Jam Miller, their running back, but I think Richard Young can be able to carry the rock for this team. So I'm going to take Alabama and lay it.
I would break the tie here and go Florida State first half, either 7 or 7.5. I think if you're going to get the best effort from the Noles, it'll be early. I don't think it'll be more of the backdoor cover type, but of course, you guys are on opposite ends there. Opposite ends on that game, but same side on this one here. It's a Sunday special. It's going to be at Hard Rock Stadium down here in South Florida. Notre Dame and Miami. Fighting Irish laying 2.5 and a total that's just under 50 here. Danny, I'm going to give you first word because you've taken the under, but slow start to the first half here.
Yeah, all along, kind of ever since we've started previewing this game a month ago, I've said I think it's going to be a lower scoring affair, and I'm a little bit scared of the total just because of big play capability as these teams kind of feel each other out. But I think it could be one of those slobber knocker type of games. Miami's defense could be pretty special. We've talked a lot about that matchup. They got a guy, Ruben Bain, coming off the edge that could really provide some problems. And I think Miami is going to sell out to stop Jeremiah Love, the superstar running back for Notre Dame, who I think they're going to rely. Notre Dame's going to want to establish that run around C.J. Carr, who's not as mobile as Riley Leonard, more of a pocket passer. And the one reason why I'm a little bit scared of the late game total and having the total in the full game is because at some point, I just wonder if they pick their shots and they could see a Jaden Greathouse making a great play, taking their shot over the top. Does Carson Beck get more comfortable in that offense as the game progresses? Does he figure out which receiver, where they've lost so much, reception yards returning? They've lost 6 of their top receivers from last season. They've gone to the portal and younger talent to try to fill that void. Does he settle in late in that game? Wouldn't be shocked if it maybe unfolds like the game we saw in week 0 with Iowa State and Kansas State. Little ugly early, and then all of a sudden you see a flurry of points late. I don't hate the total game under, but I don't want to sweat it late on Sunday night. So I'll go ahead and take the first half under that key number of 24.5.
Chip, you're okay going full game under?
I am unafraid of perspiration, Tommy, especially here in week 1. It's good for the soul. Put some hair on your chest. I'm going to go full game under. I see this game very similarly to the way that DK does, but then there's also the consideration of the way that each one of these teams would be playing it down the stretch. I don't think Notre Dame, if it has a lead, is going to ask C.J. Carr to do anything that would blow that lead. And if you are Miami, well, I think that you are probably in a position where we're going to get to see the Hurricanes running game in a way that we did not not when Cam Ward was back there. Both teams running the football, both teams relying on the line of scrimmage. This was, I mean, classic, when you got it. This is opening at 54.5, so get it now while you've still got it over 49 at 49.5.
All right, great stuff, guys. We've got to hit our first break here in HQ Spotlight, but when we come back, both Syracuse and Tennessee also trotting out new quarterbacks. See which side the fellas are on with a 2-touchdown spread in Atlanta. Welcome back to HQ Spotlight for our AP Top 25 Pick Show. That is Chip Patterson, Danny Cannell, and I'm Tommy Tran. All right, Thursday night affair, number 25, Boise State, Danny. The Ashton Gentilis Broncos on the road laying 5.5. Now, this game was at 8 at one point. It's been 6.5 to 5.5 here against South Florida. Take me through why you think the points are going to be what you want here. Is this a fade of Boise State, or are you backing USF in some capacity here?
It's both. Boise State has a big question mark, and that's what they're going to be like post-Ashton Genty. Now, Maddox Matson, their quarterback, did a phenomenal job kind of executing the offense, but one of the best things for a young quarterback is to have a running game that seems close to unstoppable. I don't think they'll have a huge problem replacing him, and Maddox Matson has played really good at the quarterback position, but Byron Brown, the quarterback for USF, is actually healthy for the first time in a while. Missed a lot of last season with an injury. He's back to healthy. Wallace Wade Stadium, I think that the atmosphere could be pretty big for Boise State to go on that road. I've been to Boise, Idaho. It is gorgeous this time of year. Maybe wear little sleeves, come out a little soft hoodie type. I'm hoping for a hot, humid game on Thursday night where it kind of becomes one of those grinding type games. But Byron Brown is a pretty special quarterback. Alex Golesh has really flourished with him when he's been healthy at the quarterback position. So I like USF here. I actually think they're a live dog in this situation. I love the points, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if you could see a potential upset. But since I'm going to get points, I'm going to go ahead and take them.
Looks like the market has been following Danny because, again, it's been trending down now to 5.5. Look, he bought Maddox back at quarterback. They've got like 6 other returning starters on that Boise State team there, Chip. The Broncos should be okay, no?
Hey, listen, this is disrespectful to Spencer Danielson, a head coach who is 15-3 since taking over the Broncos as the head man. He has been in Boise with this football program. It's back since 2017, and I have enjoyed getting to see Spencer Danielson and the way he handles getting his team mentally prepared for the pressures that they have faced. That USF is not going to play Oregon in Eugene. USF is not trying to get them ready for a Mountain West title game or a college football playoff, but I do think that there is something about the intensity of a season opener on the road where I'm expecting the most out of what I think is one of the best coaches out there in the Mountain West. I understand why there is a draw to think, hey, the boys from Boise, they're not going to be able to hang in Tampa. Hey, we love Alex Golesh and Byron Brown, but I'm telling you there is a weight class difference between these two teams. I think Boise State shows it. I think Boise State wins by a touchdown or more.
And that game will be at Raymond James, so they're going to be the bright lights of an NFL stadium there for the home dogs. All right, we can probably be quick on this. Number 12, Illinois hosting Western Illinois on Friday night. Both of you guys are okay laying the 45.5, DK. Take me through it.
Chip, I got a trivia. You know the Western Illinois mascot name?
No, tell me.
The Leathernecks. I really wanted to back them just for that reason alone, but we are a Luke Altmaier pod on the Cover 3 podcast. Huge fans of him. To be honest with you, I don't love this game. It's probably a stay away. It's an avoid for me, but I do think Western Illinois is going to be in over their heads on this one. You've got the returning presence of Luke Altmaier at quarterback. He's going to be breaking in new receivers. This will be a perfect time for Barry Lunny, their offensive coordinator, to kind of get their rhythm going, and ultimately I think the physicality of Illinois will be too much for Western Illinois. So I'll lay those points.
Chip?
Yeah, this is a situation where we've got to figure out who's going to be replacing Zachariah Franklin and Pat Bryant, which means to me more competitive snaps where we're trying to let more wide receivers get some looks. There's a reason to stay a little bit more aggressive, including the fact that there's a big non-conference trip to go play Manny Diaz's Duke team here before the end of the month. And so I think Illinois wants to get in some good work a little bit deeper into the game. I'll lay the points.
All right, Chip will lay it. More of a lean for Danny in this game with a big number again at 45.5. All right, let's get to one of a couple of games that will be neutral site games at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. It's going to be Syracuse catching anywhere between 13.5 or 14. This is where the hook might matter here against number 24, Tennessee. Now, you guys are both on the same side, but you also have a total play, Danny. So I'm going to have you go first because we talked about new quarterbacks, new faces No more Kyle McCord, and of course, Nico Imaliavas down in Westwood. Take me through the handicap.
So this one, to me, does come a lot to what you're talking about. The inexperience at quarterback for both these teams and kind of new system. Joey Aguilar did play pretty well in the Sun Belt a couple of years ago. And ironically, in this wild story that we see only in today's college football world, he was at UCLA, went through a spring practice, and then after gets into Tennessee late, finally wins the job, which they just announced a couple weeks ago. But in a system where Josh Heupel really does put a lot on the quarterback's shoulders to trust them to make the right reads, I think this will be one they try to establish the run game, which could be challenging without the best running back in the SEC, Dylan Sampson, off to the NFL. Steve Angeli takes over the helm for Syracuse at the Orange. Another one was not there in the spring. They didn't like the quarterback from the spring last year. He didn't win the job. So they decided to go get Steve Angeli in the portal. He's reunited with his high school football coach, who's now his quarterback coach. Ultimately, I think this game will be lower scoring as those offenses try to figure them out. And if it's a low scoring affair, I think those 13.5 points are too much. Fran Brown, the team has bought into the culture he's trying to build at Syracuse, which is a little bit more chip on your shoulder. Go in there. I think nobody's been talking about them. The only thing that people have been talking about Syracuse is their schedule, which is one of the hardest schedules in the entire country. This is one opener. I think it could be one where they're feeling each other out for a while. So I like the under, and I like the points for Syracuse.
So, Chip, Danny's still okay with the 13.5. Are you still okay with the loss of the hook, or do you need that 14 to play this year?
No, I'm still going to take Syracuse. I'm not going to be too worried about the hook because for me, this is about big game Fran Brown. Brown went 3-1 against AP top 25 teams. And if you remember, the only one loss was one where nobody knew what happened to Kyle McCord. I mean, the man could not stop throwing pick sixes against Pitt every other time that they were faced with the challenge. Anywhere from, of course, we remember beating Miami at the end of the season, but even taking on a very dangerous UNLV team on the road in Vegas. Syracuse seemed to always answer the call, and for that reason, especially in a season opener, now I like this Syracuse team to be able to step up and make this competitive, make Tennessee sweat a little bit. So even as it moves from 14 to 13.5, I would much rather have the dog than to be laying these points with the Vols.
Okay, you guys are on the same side there. Same side in Bloomington with Indiana and ODU. 23.5, Chip. Take the points, lay it with confidence.
Lay them and take them in the fourth quarter pre-flop because nobody smokes it through the filter like Coach Sig. Nobody has a more relentless approach to the way that they absolutely pick teams apart. It did not matter what the margin was. This was an Indiana team that played through the whistle, and I expect that to be the case once again. We've heard all of his mantras, all of his sayings. The one that stands out to me when it comes to making picks for Indiana is relentless, and I think they will be relentless with the Monarchs.
I totally agree. I mean, we talked to Kirk Cinetti. It felt like he almost had a chip on his shoulder still, even though they got to the playoffs. But people discredited him, said, oh, they weren't competitive against Notre Dame. They shouldn't have been there. That narrative has been there all season long. When you asked him about who could be the next Indiana, he's like, wait, we're going to be the team that's going on the hunt this year. We're not going to be flying under the radar at all. And the one thing with a resume which is very weak, their schedule is tougher than last year, but with a few non-conference opponents, which are absolute cakewalks, what do you have to do when you have the opportunity? You have to run up the score, something they absolutely did last year. When they were in control of the game, they put the hammer down, as Chip said. I think this will be another one of those type of games. Fernando Mendoza comes in. I think it might be an upgrade at quarterback from them, the transfer from Cal. They want to get him comfortable with that passing attack, so I think you'll see a big game for Indiana.
All right, lay north of the 3 touchdowns. And by the way, already given out a sicko quarter play. That's going to be a tease for Chip Patterson. He's got another one coming on the show, but we've got to hit a break here on HQ Spotlight. We'll come back with some national title contenders, including Georgia and Penn State. Nittany Lions 44-point favorites against Nevada. Welcome back to the show. Oh, there's the music. Big time. Big Ten on CBS. Shout out to our girl Jenny Dell once again on the sidelines. Top 2 in the preseason poll for Penn State for just the second time in program history. Second team ever to return a 3,000-yard passer and 2 1,000-yard rushers back. So high expectations there at Penn State with Saturday coverage on CBS and streaming on Paramount+. And also, guys, with Nevada in town, a sky-high spread of 44.5. So, Chip, take me through your full game analysis of laying this big number and feeling pretty good about it.
Yeah, I just think that there's going to be a spot where Penn State gives us a oh my goodness, why are they still messing around with this team? I just do not expect it to be right out of the gate. This is a Penn State team that understands the expectations. They feel the pressure. It's everything that we got, not just from the coaching staff, from the leaders on this team. And I think there is such a desire to make sure that this is a tone-setting win. That means that they win this thing by 45 or more. So I know it's a massive number, but I just think that with all the time leading into this season, I think they'll be very crisp with their execution, and that means they win handily.
So Nevada is also kind of an easy fade in terms of the spread, Danny, and taking a look here at James Franklin as 40-burger favorites or more. So Chip was mentioning about maybe greasing up the wheels, maybe getting things going before then going. You think they're going to get out and get their 27.5 right out the gate?
I do. I am captain of the Drew Aller fan club this year. We talked to him in Las Vegas at the Big Ten Media Days, and he is, his confidence is an all-time high. There's so many question marks about who's going to be catching the football for him. They go to the portal and get 3 players, including Syracuse wide receiver Trevor Pena, who's in there now, catching the ball from them, as well as a couple others. They do have to place Tyler Warren, but then they've got the backs in the backfield coming back too, in Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. But most importantly, last year I thought they were a little bit sluggish and sloppy early because Drew Aller was learning Andy Colton-Nicky's system for the first time. Now he's had an entire year playing in it, an entire offseason to get comfortable with it. I think they want to come out, set the tone, and here's what scares me a little bit about the big number at the end. They don't need style points. You know what they need? They need to manage reps because they need to stay healthy for these first 3 games, which are all easily winnable games where they're going to be heavy favored in all of them. I worry that they take out those starters possibly at halftime when they're sitting there pretty looking at a 35-0 or a 28-0 type of lead. I think there's a chance for some defensive scores early in this game. I think it's going to be a complete domination, and I think they get the starters in and get them out, similar to what you see in the NFL.
All right, so you guys are both on the Nittany Lions, just in different ways, so we'll see if we can cash both of those there on Saturday. A little more macro on the Nittany Lions because this will be the first crack a lot of fans will be able to see this version of a Penn State team, which, Danny, every year it's like, okay, they're really good, but they're not as good as Michigan or Ohio State. Yet this year, both you and Chip believe that this is the year. How much of that has to do with the schedule and how much of it is just being bullish on this particular team?
It's both. It's all of it. It's the total package. The schedule sets up nicely. They really have a 2-game schedule, and I don't mean to disrespect anybody else on there, but Oregon at home, they should be favored in that one. The Ohio State one is a game that, yes, it's challenging. They'll probably be an underdog potentially, but that's a game they don't have to win. The Iowa game is a little bit one where you could potentially see a potential hiccup, but again, they'll be favorites on the road there. It is the total package. Again, the mentality of this team reminds me of what you heard out of Michigan 2 years ago and what you heard out of Ohio State last year. A lot of guys returning that could have left to the NFL, and they said, you know what? We felt like we fell short of our goals. We want to go out there and do something special. We want to bring a national championship, help James Franklin silence the critics, and bring up his record of 1-15 against top 5 opponents. They really seem mentally focused, dialed in, confident, and ready to do something special, and I think it kicks off this weekend.
I know Ohio State and Notre Dame benefited from the expanded college football playoff, but I think so did Penn State, right?
Yes.
Because James Franklin, Chip, couldn't get over the hump. He gets this now and a team and a schedule that's certainly set up for him for success.
Yeah, and the way that it ended, I think, is what set up to what Danny's talking about, where the players have that unfinished business feeling that they want to come back and try to take the next step. They got that taste. They went out onto the field, tie game, thinking they're going to punch a ticket to the national championship game, only to have Notre Dame walk out of Hard Rock Stadium with the W and the advancing. So for Penn State, I'll tell you one thing from a football perspective that I'm excited about. Year 2 of Andy Kotelnicki, which means that Drew Aller has a little bit of continuity, something that he hasn't had for a lot of his time. I also love the transfer portal additions at wide receiver, a position where they were severely lacking last season. All of it sets up for something where I think Drew Aller does prove the doubters wrong and live up to that 5-star rating that he got as a prospect coming out of high school.
One thing he told us too, he said he lost a couple pounds. He tried to lose a little bit of weight. I think you'll see him use his legs a little bit more this year. Maybe not in these first 3 games, but once that schedule gets a little more challenging, I'd keep an eye out for Drew Aller using his legs and mobility a little bit more.
Okay, so high expectations there for the Nittany Lions. We know certainly what Kirby Smart and Georgia brings to the table, guys, taking on Marshall with a spread just under 40. Now, Chip, I'm a little behind on my herd research here. I know some years they can be feisty, but the spread tells me that they're not. But you've also targeted a total here in this game with the Dogs.
That is because Kirby Smart is 0-13 against the spread when favored by 38 or more points. Because when he goes up against an opponent like this, we're just trying to get some work in. We're just trying to break a nice and easy sweat. That's why I'm going to go with the under. I think that Georgia's defense is going to keep this Marshall team in check. Marshall may have won the Sun Belt a year ago, but the entire team is now playing at Southern Miss along with the coaching staff. I don't think the Herd are going to score many points in this game. And the new head coach at Marshall is Tony Gibson, the very successful defensive coordinator at both NC State and West Virginia. And so I'm not going to lay the points with Kirby because of his own track record in these types of games, but I am going to respect what they're going to do defensively, which is why I'm going to go with the under.
Look at Chip bringing the trends. Can we bring that graphic up again, though, with Kirby as a favorite there? Because Danny, you think when it's all said and done.
For me. I wish I would have seen this note before we came in here and did this one.
Well, you have a chance to turn it around and say the same.
Hey, it's like when you go to the roulette wheel and you see a bunch of blacks, you bet on red the next time. And we got red and black right here with the Georgia colors. So I'm going to say I'm going against this trend. I think the one thing that's unique about this is Gunnar Stockton, the quarterback for Georgia, has not played a lot of football. They need to get him more comfortable, and this is a great setup for their schedule because they've got 8 games in the state of Georgia. It's very favorable for the Bulldogs, and I feel like Kirby's a little bit irritated because he's reminding people, I'm one of only 3 coaches who not only has one, but has multiple national championships, and he feels like they have a roster that can get it done. And I think you might see them let Gunnar Stockton throw the ball a little bit more. The big storyline around Georgia last year, yes, it was Carson Beck's interceptions, but it was also drops by the wide receivers. They're trying to get confidence in their wide receivers, so I think you might see a rarity for Georgia to let that offense air it out a little bit, get more comfortable in the passing game before they get to the meat of their SEC schedule.
And that is their schedule that includes a couple of neutral site games this season. Let's move on.
That Georgia Tech game ain't neutral. I know it's in Atlanta, but that's going to be
heavily
Bulldogs. No.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, getting to Iowa State again. Played week 0, Dublin, Ireland. Coming back on a short week. You guys are both on the Coyotes, though, but Danny, the first half play for you.
Yeah, because this is the one where you've got the hangover of hangovers coming back from an international trip. You're feeling good, emotional win, coming up big in that spot. It's just human nature to get back on your clock, your schedule. And South Dakota, I think, is one of those kind of pesky opponents that'll come out with a game plan. They'll have some tricks up their sleeve. And I think Iowa State just would start this game a little bit sluggish. So I'm going to go ahead and take those first half points. I think Iowa State pulls away comfortably towards the end. But that 14 and a hook makes me a little bit nervous there. So I'm going to take that first half play.
Which is about 8.5 for the first half. And Chip, you're going full game.
Yeah, I am. This is another one where I'm going to get back into my trends bag, Tommy. How about Iowa State 3-10 against the spread in their last 13 games against FCS competition? And it's because you know what Matt Campbell does? He runs a spring game playbook. We just run out the 3-3-5 stack and we just play it straight ahead. We do a lot of halfback dive. We do a lot of very simple things because this game often predates the rivalry game against Iowa, which, as we know, is one of the biggest games of the entire season for the Iowa State football program. So 3-10 against FCS competition against the spread in their last 13. And by the way, this South Dakota team is no team to sneeze at. 11 wins at the FCS level last year. All of it has me taking South Dakota and the points.
Okay, taking the Coyotes and the points. Time to hit a break here at HQ Spotlight. We'll continue our way through the AP Top 25. Will Oregon get off to another slow start like they did against Idaho last year? That and the other teams rounding out the top 25. All right, let's keep it going. I mentioned the slow start Oregon got off to last year with Dan Lanning. Ended up fine in the regular season. Don't want to revisit what happened in the playoff. But Montana State just under 4 touchdowns, DK, 27.5. Why are we not going to get off to a slow start this year for this Ducks team at Autzen?
This is kind of a similar play to what I was talking about with Georgia and Kirby Smart, kind of flying under the radar. And it's hard to say that because they're both ranked in the top 10. Like, It's not like they're getting no attention, but I haven't seen anybody pick Oregon to win the Big Ten, which they did last year until that performance against Ohio State, where they got absolutely waxed at the Rose Bowl. This is one they have to get off to a strong start. They're working a new quarterback, and I think Dan Lanning will remind them of some of the games that they had were much closer last year. Not only that one that you mentioned, Tommy, but also the game against Boise State, where they kind of had to figure things out. breaking in a new quarterback in Dante Moore, but keep an eye out for a freshman wide receiver, Decorian Moore, who is an absolute blazer on the outside. Think of a Moore style like a Ryan Williams at Alabama, who took the college football world by storm. He and Jeremiah Smith, the true freshman phenoms at wide receiver. He is an electric wide receiver on the outside. I think they get him heavily involved. And then the other aspect of this, Dan Lanning's squad, I know they've lost some, but Mateo Uyunglele is one of the better defensive teams in the country. I think they completely smother Montana State and run away with this game.
Chip, you're on the other side. Is it a numbers play, or is there something you're seeing from this Bobcats team here to cover the number?
A little bit of Bobcats, a little bit of Ducks. First on the Bobcats side, Montana State 15-1 last season, made it all the way to the national championship game before falling short. This is not your typical FCS opener. I am going to take note of what happened in that 24-14 game against Idaho State last year. But Tommy, I'm also listening to Dan Lanning. I'm listening to Dan Lanning be a little bit curious about what his team is going to look like. In media availability this week, Lanning said, whatever we are on Saturday, I hope it's nowhere close to what we are at the end of the season. That is not the sound of a coach who thinks that this team is going to be at peak efficiency in week one. I think this number suggests something closer to peak efficiency than even what Oregon is expecting. So give me the very, very strong Montana State side to make this a little interesting.
Okay, opposite ends there. If we get to number 18, Oklahoma, with a total at 60 and a hook. Illinois State catching 36.5 in a Saturday evening tilt. Chip, you're going Illinois State team total. You're monitoring this because it's ever fluid in terms of trying to find a key number here.
Yeah, I mean, if you go with the implied total based on the spread and the total, we're probably talking 11.5, 12.5. Really anything that would give us that sort of range is a green light go for me. And the thought is that Oklahoma's strength is the defensive side of the football. I think they've got one of the best defensive lines in the SEC. And I think that going up against this opponent, we are going to see them absolutely flex their muscles and keep them under 14 points. Offensively, still so much to learn about John Mateer, now led by offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle. In general, I am high on what that could be, but that is where I'm just going to rely on the things that I know, and that is the Sooners have got a great D, so I'm going to take the Illinois State team total under.
So to piggyback off that, Danny, then you like Oklahoma and the points. You brought up John Mateer. Some people threw out some small flyer money on Heisman. What are you thinking about him entering the year?
I don't hate it. The big question mark for John Mateer is he was at Oregon State last year playing against lesser competition. How's he going to do against the SEC competition? Well, this isn't that. This is an opportunity to play at home, to come out, get some good vibes going, find your mojo and rhythm with some of the pieces they brought in. Jaden Knott in the backfield was one of the better offseason moves when they got the running back from Cal to come in there to hand off to. And I love Chip's side, too, because Brent Venables, he's much more involved in this defense, taking over the reins, a coach that's on the hot seat. R. Mason Thomas is one of the best defenders out there in the country. I think they'll absolutely contain that. I love them going under the under, but I also think they want to build up the confidence and any question marks you have in John Mateer in this offense, which struggled mightily last season. I think this is an absolute shellacking.
So you've been laying a lot of points lately here. I'm just not that I've kept tabs on an abacus or anything, but Danny is grabbing points in this one. Long Island and the Sharks catching 45.5 against Jacqueline DiAgostino's Florida Gators. I hope Jacqueline's listening because
I hope so too.
DJ Lagway's in this game, yet you're taking the Sharks in the points.
You know, all I've heard about is this that Florida schedule is like the toughest schedule in the country, and yet here we are talking against the Long Island Sharks, for God's sake. What I'm looking at this game is all about managing the season. DJ Lagway has been banged up a ton. He missed a lot of last season. He missed the spring with a shoulder injury, comes in with a calf, and it's great news for Gator fans that he's 100% going in. But I think this is a game management type of situation. As soon as you get this game under control, which should be pretty early, you get him out. And the drop-off between DJ Lagway and the rest of the quarterbacks is pretty massive. It's my biggest concern for the Gators on the total of the season, that if something happens to DJ Lagway, I think they could be in serious trouble. But this is one of those season management type of games where they get the starters out as soon as possible. They're clearly the better roster. They don't need style points. They just want to get the win, get it comfortably. But that 45.5 is too many for me.
All right, Danny. I have some words, bro. You're talking about this softball schedule. We got LSU, Miami, Texas, and Texas A&M after we get LIU in South Florida. And I don't want to hear about this LIU. You have them to cover the 45.5. It's just downright disrespectful, and it's fine. Whatever. Like, your squad won 2 games last year, so I wish you well. And we're going to get at least 9 wins in this bad boy schedule. Let's pull it up again. LSU, Miami, Texas, Texas A&M, that is ranked. Yeah,
don't talk
Georgia,
about their preseason
Kentucky,
rankings. What
Ole
are they going to
Miss,
be at the end of the
Tennessee.
season?
Yeah, but what, your 3-win team with FSU and Mike Norvell and company? I digress. I've taken up too much time here. I'm going to send it back to you guys, Tommy. Tommy Tran, be the mediator, please.
Thank you, Jacqueline. There's 2 things I've learned working with Jacqueline the last few years. Don't mess with her Gators, and she's a Swiftie diehard, which she did a great job with the breaking news with Kelsey, by the way, yesterday. Back to the total, Chip. I don't know how you follow that up with the under here, this one, huh?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm just going to discuss something that Jacqueline's very aware of, which is that this Florida team is kind of made of glass. I mean, we have injury concerns on offensive line and quarterback, wide receiver, and you just understand that Florida, 100% healthy for an entire season, can win 9 games. It's one of the most talented rosters in the entire country. However, those injury concerns are going to impact the way that they approach a game like this. Long Island is horrendous. This team was 4-8 in the FCS last year. They have never beaten an FBS opponent. They lost 45-0 to TCU, which is why we go with the under, because the best game for Florida is a fast game with very few snaps and very few possessions for the players that they need against that very difficult schedule. So, yeah, give me the under for this one.
Okay. I'll take 45-0.
Yeah,
I'll take that all day. We can both win that one.
Long Island might not even score a single point. All right, let's get to K-State, which lost to Iowa State in Dublin. They're also back on a short week, still in the top 20, of course, coming into the week. And this first one with week 0 and week 1. North Dakota catching 25.5. Chip, you're going back to a team total market.
Yeah, Kansas State's just got to get this offense going. New offensive coordinator Matt Wells, clearly very frustrated with the way that things went. You know, you've got that long rugby grass out there in Dublin. Whole team looked a little bit slow. I thought Avery Johnson had a pretty good game, but man, they need to get into a better rhythm after going up against that Iowa State front. I'm expecting that they have learned from their mistakes, and they want to make sure that they have some success in this one. So I'm going to go with the team total over 23.5.
This one makes me a little bit nervous because Dylan Edwards, who they lost in the first quarter of that game and was returning the punt, fumbled it, and lost him for the game. He's out for a couple weeks, so they're going to miss him during this game. But this one for me is about Chris Kleiman letting his team get that taste out of their mouth. You mentioned Matt Wells, the offensive coordinator. I actually thought Avery Johnson played pretty well in that game and kind of got it going late. We saw a flurry of points in that fourth quarter. A couple things don't go their way, but I like the way their defense was flying around. I think they clean up some of the drop passes they had due to some of the conditions. A little bit dreary, a little bit wet, lost their footing quite a bit of times. I think they come back, get that taste out of their mouth with a big win. All
right, and let's end with Texas A&M, UTSA. You guys are on opposite ends, but again, a scenario where both can win. Chip, give me the laydown and the handicap here.
Texas A&M in the first half. I just don't think that UTSA is at a place right now where they are ready to go snap for snap, possession for possession. But Texas A&M also with some bigger fish to fry beyond their in-state foes from the American. That's why I don't want to mess with the second half. I've got them leading by 2 touchdowns at halftime to get this cover.
I kind of like that play. I do like that play for them. But I'm going to go ahead and say that this is about the respect of Texas high school football coaches. Jeff Traylor coming up through those ranks. You know, a lot of those players for UTSA would have loved the chance to play for the Aggies. I think you'll get their best effort. And this is another one where I don't think Texas A&M needs any sort of style points. They want to just get in, get out. And meanwhile, it's UTSA's Super Bowl, playing with that chip on their shoulder. I think they make it a little bit more of a physical game. Jeff Traylor is a great coach. I think this game is within that number, so I'll take the points.
Got to hit another break. When we come back to the ranked-unranked matchup between LSU and Clemson. Dabo's guys favored by a field goal and a hook over BK's dudes. So we talked about how top-heavy week 1 is going to be in college football. 3 top 10 ranked matchups. This is the third one that we're going to tackle now. However, for LSU and Brian Kelly, and even dating back to the Ed O days, Tigers have gotten off to slow starts, evidenced by that graphic there. and they'll have to do it on the road at the other Death Valley, dare I say, against Clemson with a total of 57.5. A Saturday, 7:30 kickoff back here with DK and Chip. So, Danny, give me the lowdown on this particular game. A lot's on the line. I mentioned the slow starts for Brian Kelly and his Tigers. On the flip side with Dabo, he's asking everybody, don't talk about my team as being not only ACC relevant, but nationally relevant again.
Yeah, and something's got to give in this one. You mentioned LSU's record in season openers. Clemson was 0-3 versus the SEC last year, so they want to try to get off that schneid as well and get a win against a quality opponent, because that's been the biggest knock for them for the last year and even the last couple of years, is they really have come up short in some of those big games. Think back to last year's opener versus Georgia, where Cade Klubnik looked completely overwhelmed in that game, and they got beat there in Atlanta in that neutral site game. This is one they want to come out the gate strong, and this is absolutely a game with national championship implications, with playoff implications, your perception. If it's a close game, both of these teams will be able to achieve all their goals, but if it does get lopsided for either one, you wonder which direction it could go.
So it's going to be Cade Klubnik and Garrett Nussmeier as we're taking longest active losing streaks in season openers. LSU with 5, Clemson with 2. Chip, you've gotten into the exotic market of Clemson third quarter -1.5 before a single snap in this game has been played.
Yeah, thanks to our friends at FanDuel, you can take advantage of the third quarter and fourth quarter market even before kickoff. And here's the reason why, because the Clemson football program believes in the middle 8, which is the last 4 minutes of the second quarter, first 4 minutes of the third quarter, so much that they put that in the game notes, and the stats back it up. Clemson was one of the best third quarter teams in the country last season, a plus 6.4 points per game margin in the third quarter. I think that it could be Garrett Nussmeier and the rest of that LSU offense might be on the front foot, especially against a Clemson defense under new leadership. But do I trust Brian Kelly to make better halftime adjustments than that brain trust of Garrett Riley and Tom Allen? No, I do not. I think that the Clemson Tigers and their faith on trying to make sure that they are so good before and after halftime is going to give them an opportunity to run out and take control of this game in the third quarter. So that's why I'm going to take Clemson, not after they rub the rock and run down the hill. I'm going to take Clemson after they come back out of the building to go win that third quarter.
I actually like in this game, we've got a Dabo big game unders. I don't know about the total, because I think with both these quarterbacks playing, they're so experienced, they played so well. Both of them, Garrett Nussmeier is a little bit more of a gunslinger mentality. Cade Klubnik really operates successfully in that system. I think this is one of those feel-out type of first halves where how does LSU's offensive line protect Garrett Nussmeier, who was harassed last year, and he's the definition of a pure pocket passer. They would like him to run some more this year, to get outside the pocket, to take some of that pressure, and the offensive line was better than they are this year, where they're still struggling trying to replace a lot of guys against Clemson's defensive front, which is pretty ferocious. And I mentioned the struggles that Clemson has had against SEC teams. I wonder if they sort of feel things out in that first half, play not to make the big mistake, pick their shots, try to establish a run game, which they've got a converted wide receiver now playing running back for them. They're still trying to figure out that. They do have a lot of weapons at wide receiver, but I think this is one of those kind of defensive slugfests early while the offenses play catch up, kind of find their legs under them. Because remember, in the offseason, nobody tackles. Nobody goes live anymore. So a lot of times there's just a little bit of, teams are kind of not on the same page offensively. I think defenses have the advantage in those types of situations. So I think this game gets off to a little bit of a slower start.
Let me ask both of you guys a follow-up question, a bit of a side quest, if you will, in this game. Will we see the Heisman winner come from this game, Chip Patterson?
No, I don't think so. I think that both of these quarterbacks are going to be facing much more difficult challenges, but I think that the Heisman hype going into the season, both of them being at the near the top of the Heisman odds board, is going to have everyone overreacting. I think the loser is going to have a very difficult time even making it back as a finalist, but I think the way that Heisman voters tend to follow the season, many of the preseason favorites do not end up winning the trophy, and I think that both of these quarterbacks would rather be holding championship trophies than the Heisman Trophy, and I'm going to say no on that one.
So I would say there's more of a chance for Cade Klubnik if he loses this game to battle his way back in. Remember last year I mentioned the Georgia game, how abysmal he was. He was atrocious. Then at the end of the season, statistically, he had one of the best seasons of anybody in college football, actually played really good down the stretch. Even in a loss against South Carolina, had him in position to win the game, except to have that unfortunate interception with a tip ball. Played really well against SMU, and then played really good against Texas in the playoffs. I think with his schedule, statistically, he could vault himself into that conversation when people wouldn't remember that LSU lost. So I actually think if Cade Klubnik loses this game for Clemson, you might find value in him. But I would not touch Garrett Nussmeier if he loses this game with this remaining schedule that they have. As it stands, both players are 9-1 behind Arch Manning in the Heisman market. Let's get back to game plays here with Michigan. With a total of 49.5, laying 34.5 against New Mexico. That's a Saturday night tilt. You guys are both on Michigan. Tell us why, Danny. I can't wait to watch this game strictly for the Bryce Underwood impact. I mean, he's getting the nod, he's getting the start. But I do think this is a game where Sherrone Moore just takes advantage of the offense and says, you know what? We're going to run the football. We're going to really try to establish it. I think you'll see Bryce Underwood's legs come into play here. But I also think Michigan's defense is probably being overlooked somewhat on the defensive side of the ball. I think this will be too much to handle for New Mexico, so I think Michigan runs away with this one.
Because they've got OU on tap, and usually we think look ahead. But when you say true freshman needs the reps, probably going to play most of the game, they have to have a good showing, which probably means they cover this number, Chip.
Yeah, I'm going to lay it. It's not my most confident of these plays that we are giving out here today, but this is at 34.5. You're sitting there under a key number. I do agree Bryce Underwood probably stays in another series or two just so he can continue to get that experience against the live action. But even more than my support of Michigan, this is a fade of a New Mexico program that lost its head coach, lost its star quarterback, and is in total rebuild mode right now heading into 2025.
All right, let's get to the other Mercedes-Benz Stadium game in Atlanta Sunday, so no Chick-fil-A in the concession stands. Vatek catching 7.5 against South Carolina, 52 in a hook. Again, same side. Danny, which side is that going to be for you guys?
I'm going to go ahead and snatch up the team from the ACC. And you know what's kind of interesting is that Virginia Tech last year was kind of like South Carolina is this year. So a lot of people are kind of trendy South Carolina. Lenora Sellers has superstar potential. People think he could really take that next step. A lot of the similar conversations were around Kyron Drones last season before they kind of imploded. They lost early to Vanderbilt, kind of could never get things back on track. But this is a game for Brent Pye, the head coach of Virginia Tech, where you have got to figure you get his best effort. And he is a defensive-minded coach. And the one adjustment that I think you even saw Illinois make in the bowl game, you cannot let Lenora Sellers beat you with his legs. He is a dynamic runner. They were able to do that somewhat. And I think you'll see Virginia Tech's best effort. I do think South Carolina wins this game, but I think they'll have their hands full. Also to remember, that Lenora Sellers playing with a new offensive coordinator. So he's going to be getting familiar with a new play caller. I think some of that could take some time to get used to. They lost a ton of talent to the NFL, too. Nick Immanwari, they lost to the NFL. Dylan Sampson, or the edge rusher from last year that was opposite Kyle Kennard is back, but Kyle Kennard is off. So how does he do with some of those matchups that are going to be a little more tricky for him? So I think this game's going to be closer than people think.
Folks at home couldn't see when Danny started his answer. Chip went, oh, like that a little bit. Chip, on the same side here with DK.
Yeah, you talk about the Lenora Sellers and Kyron Drones, and I'm actually going back to something I heard this week from Kyron Drones. You know, he's dealing with a new offensive coordinator, much like Sellers is, but he said that it's good to have an offensive coordinator who played the quarterback position, noting that his last two offensive coordinators were both former offensive linemen or offensive line coaches, and he believes that Philip Montgomery, who really rose in the ranks as an offensive coordinator for Art Briles' Baylor teams, has been able to help him unlock the best version of himself. Brent Pry also believes that this roster is finally the closest to his vision of what Virginia Tech football can be. This is not a fade of South Carolina. This is strictly a belief that Virginia Tech right now is in position to be very competitive in this game, and at 7 and a hook on a neutral site, I'm going to end up taking the dog.
All right. Home stretch time on the show when we come back. Of course, talking about teams in the top 25. Guys are going to predict the final score of Arkansas Pine Bluff and Texas Tech. And these Arizona State Sun Devils, the fighting Pete Priscos, are on tap. Let's get to Arkansas Pine Bluff at number 23, Texas Tech. As of this taping, no official spread in this game. Golden Lions of the Southwestern Athletic West. So we're just going to ask you to think how and predict how this game is going to play out. Chip, how does this game play out in your eyes down there?
I've got this one about 55-10, right around that 45 we often see against FCS opponents. Arkansas Pine Bluff played Arkansas last season when you're looking for your FBS data point, and the score was, oh my gosh, 70-0, Tommy. Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be the squad that's going to put an upset scare in a Red Raiders roster that is loaded up to be one of the most talented in the Big 12. I think that this is a group that takes care of business. Baron Morton gets his time, but Will Hammond, too, the backup quarterback, I think is a capable player of scoring touchdowns. So I think that Texas Tech wins this one handily.
Yeah, this one's going to be lopsided. I went a little bit less on the point side for Texas Tech. I had a 45-10 win. I think you make a great point, too, because Baron Morton, as good as a quarterback as he's been, he has been, had the injury bug, dealing with a shoulder injury, missed the spring, so maybe they get him out clearly, to get some of the backups, some ropes, so they have a little bit more depth at the quarterback position for Texas Tech. This one's going to be lopsided, though, for sure.
Let's get to Ole Miss. No more Jackson Dart. He's been having one heck of a preseason up there with the Giants against Georgia State with a spread of 35.5. Life without Jackson Dart, maybe getting off to a slow start in the first half, DK?
That's what I have. I love Austin Simmons. I think he could be the breakout player for the entire SEC this season. Somebody who comes in, he graduates high school early, he graduates college already. He's only 19 years old. He's a two-sport athlete who's finally kind of turned his attention to football away from baseball. But I do think you even saw this with Jackson Dart early in his career. You're getting your feel for what it's like at the next level, and it's a lot of points there in this game. So I'll say they're going to be up comfortably, maybe 28-3, something like that, 28-0. But I'll say it's under the 34.5 in the first half.
You're going under. Chip's going over with a team total.
Yeah, it feels like it's a sicko mode play, especially in this game. But I think that with Ole Miss, we're talking a lot about Jackson Dart, losing Trey Harris. They lost a lot off this defense, especially along the defensive line, where I think they were one of the best in the entire country, certainly when it came to the counting stats like sacks. I think this Ole Miss defense is going to be taking a step back, and I think that we've got a low total for Georgia State. So maybe they do need to be able to punch it in against the backups deep into the game, but I think that Georgia State can get us to 13, 14 points. So I'm going to go Panthers team total over in their opener.
Chip, you mentioned maybe taking a step back defensively. What are the realistic expectations for Lane Kiffin and this Rebels team, you think, this year?
I think it's to contend for the college football playoff. I mean, they should have made the college football playoff last season. There is no reason why that team, as loaded up as they were, should have lost to Kentucky at home. They were the better team than the Florida Gators when they went and lost that game deep into the season. You take those two games and flip them the other way, that's an 11-1 regular season with the win over Georgia, no question, in the college football playoff. You take one of those results and flip them, they're 10-2 and possibly making the college football playoff, if not likely making the college football playoff. So I think that even though I am expecting a step back defensively, you asked me about expectations. The expectations are that Ole Miss contend to be a top 5 team in the SEC, and that means you're contending for the CFP.
I agree. I actually had them making the playoffs this year. I think they're that fourth team or third or fourth team from the SEC potentially that can make it. You look at that schedule, too. As far as comparatively to the other SEC teams, I know they have a tight stretch there and that middle portion of the season where they have to go to Georgia and to Oklahoma. But other than that, they get some of their tougher opponents at home. And I know there's a lot of question marks about new players, but they once again are one of the top portal teams in the country. And Lane Kiffin has sort of figured out how to live in the portal world, the self-described portal king. If anybody's figured out a way to do that with some of those new pieces, it's been Ole Miss.
All right, so you're willing to buy a CFP ticket there for them. All right, let's get to SMU, Chip, where this time last year in the ACC, they're talking about dark horse with this Mustang team. Had a good year. As for this game against East Texas A&M, it's another one near 50 at 48.5. You want to lay the 48.5 in this game.
All gas, no brakes. Rhett Lashley's got a chip on his shoulder. He thinks that SMU is getting overlooked and underrated. He thinks the ACC is getting bad-mouthed, and he thinks that his quarterback, Kevin Jennings, is not being included in enough of the conversations when it comes to the best quarterbacks in the ACC and around the country. I think that this is an offense that wants to go even faster, really stress defenses, and normally those kind of offenses absolutely light up the scoreboard scoreboard against an opponent like this. So I've got SMU winning and covering this massive number.
I had him as a first half, but it was hard for me to find a first half number. So if you have to lay him, I would agree with Chip. I think he is spot on, and I think Brent Lashley is spot on about the lack of respect this team has been given. Their first year in the ACC, they come in and make it to the ACC title game, come up just short. And the conversations around SMU last year was if they didn't battle their way back and make that game close against Clemson, they might have been left out despite the fact they had such a great regular season. And I totally agree. Kevin Jennings returning. He wasn't even the full starter going into last year, won that job 2 or 3 games in the season, and everybody's written him off because the performance against Penn State wasn't great. He did have a few bad interceptions that were really ugly, but you know what else they did against Penn State? They moved it between the 20s a lot throughout that game, just couldn't punch it in. I think they were 0 for 4 in the red zone when they got there, so they've got a bad taste in their mouth. They want to get out. I think they take it off on their open opponent.
Producer in my ear asking about schedule with this Mustang team. Danny, take me through.
Harder than last year. It is definitely a harder schedule than it was last year for SMU. You look at the road trips there to TCU, that battle for Lions Skillet's not going to be easy. Baylor, week 2. That's the other thing. This game, they want to have a tune-up game for Baylor, who's one of the tougher opponents there. And then they have to travel to Clemson. That's going to be a tough one. And then I would expect a great crowd there from Miami. And watch out for the Louisville game. So they play a lot tougher schedule than they did last year.
That's a Saturday night kick, also in the desert as well. Northern Arizona Lumberjacks catching north of 4 touchdowns against Arizona State with a total at 52.5. And Chip, the total is where it catches your eye in this game between the Sun Devils and the Jacks.
That's right, Tommy. I'm going to be going with the under, and it is the Northern Arizona of it all that I'm actually focused on. Northern Arizona, a top 25 team nationally at the FCS level. They always have a game like this where they challenge themselves, and the common thread here is the under. The last 4 games against FBS opponents for Northern Arizona have all gone under. Arizona State should be a very good team contending for a Big 12 title, but they too have bigger fish to fry out there. I think the Lumberjacks do their part, and this one goes under the total.
I'm going to say just lay them with Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham, he's made it pretty public. He said, we want to be what Clemson was in the ACC. We feel like we can be that in the Big 12, and I think he's right. I think it's been a program that's kind of been flying under the radar. They've fallen on some tough times, but I feel like they're a sleeping giant. It's a great location. You can recruit from California, from Texas, bring people out to the warm weather, and he's got an incredible quarterback in Sam Levitt, who I think is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. You lose Cam Scatterbo, but they go to the portal and get Kanye Udo from the Army, who I think is a really quality back, and they got their receiver healthy back who missed the Big 12 championship game in the playoff run, and Jordan Tyson. So I think this Arizona State picks up right back where they left off last year.
That's it, folks. Week 1 in the books with Danny Cannell and Chip Patterson every Wednesday here on HQ Spotlight. And, of course, you can catch it on YouTube. One half of the Cover 3 podcast with Bud Elliott and Tom Fornelli. Scan the QR code. Listen to them. Also check them out on their YouTube page.